Well, the Pride event is the festival. It's a two-day festival, which last year moved downtown for the first time. I'm not on their board, but I don't think I've ever missed a Pride event since I moved here now 22 years ago. The very first Pride event happened on the campus of Washington University, and it was before it officially became Pride. And the first group of people who marched that year were wearing brown paper bags over their head because they couldn't take the chance of having their photos in the newspapers. And I remember going to some of the earliest parades. I was part of the first one in Washington, D.C., the first one in New Jersey, one of the earlier ones, certainly not one of the first ones, but one of the earlier ones in New York, many of them. And you still had people who were feeling that either they couldn't be in the parade or they'd be there with their faces covered because they couldn't be in the news and have their family and their bosses see them. So to now have 100,000 people show up and be very proud of who they are is great. It's wonderful. My first Pride event here was right after the election where Freeman Bosley was elected. That was the second one. The one right before that, there was some incidents that went on in the park. It was held at Forest Park back then, and there were some incidents, and the police were nowhere to be seen. The next year, Freeman Bosley spoke. If you could find a copy of that tape, if there is one, he brought me to tears. He was the first elected or appointed government leader to ever show up at Pride in St. Louis. And spoke about the need for equality. And I've spent a lot of time with him during his years as mayor, and wherever he spoke, the same words. He would talk about the need for equality for everyone, and he would list all the communities, African American, LGBT women, but he wouldn't just say that in the community that was affected by those words. He would say that to every other community. He would talk about the unity that we all had to find. And now we got to the point that I had friends complaining last year at Pride celebration that we've got to reclaim our party. There are too many politicians in this parade. And it's sort of interesting to see that happen. Because now, yeah, we had in the last major, right before the last election, we had I don't know, 50 or 100 people marching behind an Obama re-election banner. We had Senator McCaskill. First time she wasn't there, her big van. She has this big campaign van, which you can't miss, that says McCaskill right across it. She and some of her staffers from this area were in the campaign. First time a United States Senator had publicly connected themselves to the campaign. People said, well, why wasn't she here? She had her van there. You couldn't miss that in the newscast that she had connected herself. We had Governor Nixon, first time governor. He wasn't there, but he had people with a banner for his campaign. We had people running for office. We had people in office. We had two congressmen in the parade, Congressman Carnahan, Congressman Clay, both during their careers, very, very strong advocates for LGBT rights. And like I said, we had people running for office who were there. So it's a different time. And in a comparatively short amount of time that the LGBT rights movement has come of age. But I like to believe that it's because we've had all these other movements that have happened since then, before then. We had in the 60s the civil rights movement, which primarily spoke to the problems facing African Americans in this country, and then primarily spoke to the problems facing African American men. We've had women's rights movements. We had disability rights movements. We had all these other movements where I think that's all helped create a sense in the larger community that equality is equality. But still, this has been phenomenally quick, the LGBT rights movement.
And so End of Life St. Louis is an organization that I founded shortly after leaving Black Pride. And I wanted to do, and I wanted to look at where we were within the LGBT community and our activism and our voice when it comes to giving back. And I didn't see a lot of that visibility. So, I set out and to create an event just merely asked a few friends, hey, you guys want to get together and fix some dishes and we'll have a Thanksgiving meal, you know. Didn't really know where I wanted to go with it initially or where God was sending me with it, but I wanted to do some outreach within the LGBT community because I know that there are a lot of homeless teens. But I just didn't want to stop there because I felt like that's not being inclusive. And so I said, well, let's go to the veteran community because they have, you know, helped serve our country. And how can we forget about them ever? And there are a lot of LGBT and veteran folk, you know. And then I said, well, we have issues with domestic violence within our community and drug addiction. So let's outreach, you know, those folks as well. So it all came together. My first dinner, I had probably about 150 people that showed up. And I had probably about 30 volunteers or so. And we had the time of our life. We incorporated poetry in on that. Words are very important to me. And some singing. And again, it gave folks within our community an opportunity to highlight who they were, whether they were poets, whether they were cooks, you know, whether they were hosts of some sort or just wanted to help out. And, you know, we have this issue that, okay, we're gay, so we're excluded from this and this and this, and we count ourselves out instead of counting ourselves in. And the life is about definitely counting yourself in and being inclusive and being supportive and being visible within our community to show the talents of our community, whether it be our youth, our middle age, or our older adults. And that's definitely what we're about.
You know, activism historically and probably through a lot of what you have here at the History Museum would be pictures of people picketing or doing social, direct activism of standing at a gate, blocking something, an entrance. And those things aren't happening at the same level. Direct action style events, as they're called, aren't happening at the same level as what they used to. I think in there too, similar to what I was saying about when we use certain voices, those are used sparingly and more directed in certain ways whenever they're seen as very meaningful and they're necessary to sort of stop a bad thing in its process. I think more than anything, social media, be it through Facebook or Twitter, those are mediums that have now kind of exploded in their ability to be part of the activism model, especially Twitter, because the response is almost immediate. For example, just about, let's see, this is March. In November, we had a state rep down in Nixa, Missouri, which is outside of Springfield, who on his Twitter feed had taken a picture of a student's t-shirt at a book fair that was called Harmony. It's the name of the Nixa High School Gay Straight Alliance. And he posted the picture to his Twitter feed, and he made a disparaging remark about allowing this to happen in schools, that basically you're going to have to teach students about sexual behaviors. And the response to that was incredibly swift. I think what he didn't necessarily take into account was the fact that this 38-year-old state rep was basically taking on an entire high school that's probably already on Twitter. And the rebuke of that was just so swift, we barely had to do anything. And now the backstory of it, the follow-up to that, very quick activism component that shut him down and made him apologize over Twitter, and even he led to a couple of pieces in the Springfield media where it was filmed on TV and everything. Follow-up to it would be that during our Equality Day, we host an annual day at the state capitol where we ask activists to come down and help us lobby their elected officials. We actually asked some representatives from the Nixa High School Gay Straight Alliance, the Harmony Group, to come up and meet with Representative Kevin Elmer. That was his name, is his name, I should say. And they had a great meeting. They presented him with a Harmony t-shirt, and he actually introduced them on the floor of the State House. And so I think that that's an example where here was someone who was relatively anti-gay, against the idea of having gay straight alliances in high schools, and through both a very quick response but then prolonged interaction that showed more the public education side of the work, and letting the students lead that, we think that we may actually have turned him around on some LGBT issues.